Well, welcome everyone. We've got a new project. Now I've sort of made a few attempts at recording this and various parts of it, but haven't really had the opportunity to put anything together that's solid. It's a project that is both going to be slow running and one that I'm also speed running to some degree. And that is that I now have a CBR650R, a 25 model. So it's actually the wife's bike, and in Australia they only come restricted, and at the moment they only come with the e-clutch, and there's a whole thing there. For people outside of Australia, we have to have a learners, and then we go on to provisionals, which is a P-plate system. If you're young, you go through multiple different coloured P-plates, which are all just horrendously over restrictive to the poor buggers that are trying to learn and heavily constrained. But yeah, if you're older, you're only on the first set of P plates for a little while, and then you go on to the full license and can get to a full bike. Now, trying to find bikes for female riders who are typically smaller statured is something I think the bike industry has to correct itself on. But one that she does fit on without any great issue and is actually a really, really nice bike is the CBR 650R. So we've got one of those, and we will be de-restricting it. And that's the main thing this is about. It's de-restricting the CBR 650R. I'm probably not going to tune it, but I couldn't help myself. So I've gone through and I've decoded the log files. I've looked to see if there are any issues with respect to the fuel map tables. We'll go through them, and any issues that are potentially going to impact the de-restriction. But I've spent too long putting this off, so let's get into it. So the bike in question is 22 2025 CBR 650. Now Woolwich have some issues on their website, so there's a special case of a 2021 that needs different harnesses, but it turns out that 2021 model is actually more than just 2021, so it actually is all the way out to 2023 in some models. So it's actually got a different protocol, different harnesses and stuff like that for programming. So a friend got caught in that, and we've got his maps in here as well, just for comparison. But for now, it's this CBR 650R. Now there are a lot of parts associated with this, and these are just, well, no, actually these are all of them. So a big part of it, if you come into Woolwich, I was lucky. I was able to sort of use my friend's uh, hardware, Woolwich hardware, to actually scan the bike before I ordered it, because I wanted to make sure that it was actually in the system, and it had been for quite a while, even though it was a new 25. So if we go to new, let's see, CBR 650R 20 to 2025, you can see there are all of these models, and yeah, I've got a license for it. I just haven't used it yet because I haven't written to the bike. So yeah, a lot of models here. There, some say they're restricted, most don't say anything. They're all European Australian. See, this one says restricted. Yeah, very, very um, non-communicative. It's not like and there's little logic to how these progress. So very, very hard to sort of work out what's what. I did inquire on one of the Facebook groups for Woolwich as to what people do with these, and it's not a case of you just write an unrestricted one over to the restricted ECU. It probably is possible, but the problem is that no one knows what matches up hardware wise with what. So you can't write to it and be sure. So the tuners who have been doing the de-restrictions are just writing in files, the maps, copying across maps from an unrestricted version. But then we get into, well, how do we choose which ones to do? What maps? And when you look at the different ignition maps, so what I did was, actually, we need to cancel that. Okay, so we have it open. What maps do we have? So configuration, we know that's just unifying. Here you do unify the ignition cylinder maps, but not the groups. Okay, we'll get to that. On the fuel maps, they have a IAP. Okay, so we all, most of us know about IAP. It also has TPS map, which we're also familiar with, but this one doesn't have an electronic throttle valve, so it is cable throttle, and these values do come from sensor on the bike or on the throttle buddies. So throttle position sensor plays a big part. Maybe not as big a part as we think. It's a bit hard to tell what the bike is doing, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But yeah, so in the fuel maps, it's just the standard, what we're used to. Okay, now in ignition maps, gotcha. Okay, so the ignition maps, we have neutral clutch, and we have group 1, group 2, group 3. Now these are not defined any. Oh, I've been playing around. Um, so yeah, we have group 1, group 2, group 3. Now I have seen groups defined on other models, and I suspect strongly that they are gears 1 and 2, gears 2 and 3, and gears 5 and 6. So I've modified these ones, but there's not really much to see in these maps. These are just copied in from what I have determined I'm going to use, but we want to get into how I determined what I was going to use. So the big trick was, and I cheated and used AI to do a lot of it. This is the stock, that's group 3 or group 1. So this is the stock group 1 map. Okay, and the interesting thing was the amount of ignition advance, 50 degrees advance at 100% throttle at 1300 RPM. These are quite high advance. And so I went through and I had a look, and I actually copied every single ignition map into an AI and got it to just quickly scan them and rank them for me. So I got them to rank them based upon what the final ignition advance is. Now, at full throttle, 100% throttle, 1300 RPM, with that amount of advance, you're expecting on a restriction, and the nature of the restriction on these bikes is restricted air intake. So you'll have less air. Whatever fuel the feedback loop decides that needs. All right, so you've got a very light charge in there, and you've got a lot of advance. That means that spark fires way before top dead center, 50 degrees before top dead center. And you think, well, isn't that going to detonate? But the reality is, and it sort of caught me by surprise, and I'm like, well, okay, I've got to stop and I've got to think about just what happens. What is the big difference between a restricted one and an unrestricted one? And the big difference is that there's not a lot of charge in there. So you think, okay, well, that's just going to burn really quick. But the reality is, a lot of the combustion speed in the chamber at compression is dictated by how close all of the fuel and air molecules are compacted together in that chamber. And the reality is, with a bigger air charge and corresponding fuel charge and very high compression, the combustion is faster. But if you have a less charge, less air, less fuel, right, and subsequently it is compressed a lot less, it actually takes longer for that to burn cleanly. So they have to fire the spark earlier or it won't finish burning by the time that it needs to sort of then be producing power. So the flame can't propagate through the charge in order to ignite it all cleanly. So that's why they advance it quite significantly. They're trying to do emissions. So that meant that the easiest thing to do to identify which were the restricted and the unrestricted ones was to look at the ignition, because the ones with the least amount of advance were the ones that were working with the greatest density of air fuel charge in the chamber at the time of ignition at what is probably the highest load on the bike. So that was what I did. So I cut and pasted the ignition maps, the group 1 ignition maps of every single one of those part numbers. So um, if we come back, every single one of these, I opened up, pasted it in, right, and got it to rank them all. And that is where I came to, is it going to do it? To this. So the NAs are all the restricted ones, all right. But then once I plugged them all into I wanted to actually say, well, which ones am I interested in? There's lots of different ones. How do we know which is the one for me? Now, what I went for was, and not very scientific, but I just said, well, okay, we know, we'll come back to that later. We know that we have a target here. Let's just go for whatever is the smallest, uh, the lowest amount of advance. So that was what I did. I plugged it all in and got it to tell me, based upon everything, what the lowest value one was, which one's ranked where, and basically adopted those. So in here, yeah, anything, the lowest values all got a 1, the next lowest value's got a 2, next lowest value's got a 3. So it's odd, just tell me which one's which, give them this ranking, tell me. And so from that, I grabbed these ones, all right, and then I went and did this. So I had a look at them all, and I've got some maps from the 2023, but it's a 2021 ECU CB650R, and these are, yeah, restricted and unrestricted. And some of these ECU part numbers were identical, so they've all been put together. Target's not actually in the chart, so we'll ignore that for the moment. And yeah, just put in an average one. And the chart's really hard to read, but it is quite telling. So this is our stock one. This is the CB650 stock, but this is a 2023/2021 model. So different, very different. Like it's a whole different one here. It's actually this one. So it falls into that category. Now, the other one was, well, you can see that you can see that it goes quite high, right? These ones are quite different in their behavior. So some around the idle here have quite a lot of dip. I looked to see if it was sort of an E-clutch thing versus a manual, but I couldn't see anything that would support that. Now, what's this one? I thought that was my average. That's quite high. My average should be lower. Let's just. Oh no, that's the CB Japanese version. So that's quite high. So yeah, you can see that in different things there are a lot of variation on what is effectively an identical bike, just in different regions. And so you start thinking about what might be some of the local restrictions and that they have in each of the regions. Also watched a lot of videos of people tuning them, and of course, people either don't know what they're doing, do know what they're doing, and don't want to say. But I did find one guy who didn't know what he was doing in some areas, but he did know what he was doing, and he had tried to tune the ignition and he just couldn't get any gains from it. So I was like, well, that made me confident to go, it really doesn't matter that much. there's not a lot you can play with here without getting into headwork and altering compression ratios and stuff like that. It's just going to do what it's going to do. So I actually just went with the truly genius idea of averaging them, and yeah, it's going to be safe if you can have this value, and this value. Well, that they're all the same, but some of them it does actually vary quite a bit. Um, so which ones were we interested in? So yeah, that's at 11. That's 2 degrees out. That's at 11 again. That's at 7. This one's quite a few degrees out. This one's quite a few degrees out. So if we average it to that, it's quite fine. Um, yeah, these ones are all lower, down low. Now I thought, okay, well, what about the dates? You know, is this an evolution in the models? So Honda's come out with an initial version in the first iterations of these in 2022, and by 2025 they've managed to refine them and come up with a better one that works, has less issues, say at launch with idle, or less issues with the e-clutch and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, well, I'll have a look at that, and quite surprised me because, well, how do I find that? And the only way I could do it was get on the Wayback Machine and go through the Woolwich site for when the part numbers showed up. And so I was able to take my ranked ones and put dates on them. And to be honest, it didn't make a difference. It was a real mix. So these later ones, E22, JA2, ME3, uh, so they all overlap. So they're both these higher ones and these lower ones. So, okay, that rules that out as being a great concern. So, yeah, in the end, I've gone with effectively the smooth map. I'm an averaged one. I'm sort of tweaking some of the dips within that, few percentage parameters. It's really not going to matter that much. And yeah, so that's a work in progress. But the reality is, when it comes time to restrict it, and I can't restrict it for minimum a couple of months, but the reality is, you know, it's quite a power jump on these bikes, and for a beginner, this is not a goal of getting the bike for me and wanting it de-restricted straight away because I'm an experienced rider. This is for my missus, and she's still a beginner. She's had no exposure to higher power bikes, and and they can catch beginners out. So the de-restriction, none of this is anything that I'm rushing. The only thing I'm rushing is doing effectively these videos. So this is the approach I'm going to take. Just going to average them out. So that's effectively what I've done here, which is I took all of the part numbers I was interested in, and I'll have to double check these, but yeah, they're all here. There's a few sort of extra tacked on the end because I just did put so many in, but not all of them are part of it. And yeah, they all got averaged in, so this was all for comparison, and so this is them there. And yeah, so we've got group 2, that one's averaged, and group 3, that one's averaged. Now I want to know why they're saying 31.9 and they're saying 32.4. Ah, okay. If you when I grabbed all of this data initially, I wasn't using grouped maps. So some of this data is making reference to, where are we? 31.9, right? That was just cylinder one. So subsequent stuff I've gone back, and that's why these are 32.4. So the cylinder offsets have been applied to these. So that's all in place. Anyway, jumping around, uh, yeah, I did this for some smoothing. So I believe our blue line is our target. So this is the one I want. So as I need to, I'll come in and probably, I'm not going to smooth it a lot. If I have a look at the ignition maps again, do I have them up? Okay, so we have the ignition map. Now, if we have a look at the chart, yeah, there's nothing dramatic there. There is this dip down here, but we're talking 20% throttle, we're talking idle RPM, so I'm not really worried about that. And this is an area I don't want to sort of mess with too much. It is on all of them to some degree, and I think it's more about idle control. It's not about emissions. There's no sort of 5,500 RPM dip. This one does seem to have, you look at the power curves and there's power dips at around 6,000, 5.5, 6,000. Well, they start at about 5.5 and they sort of peak at 6,000. But the issue there is I don't think it's emissions so much. They're more obvious, whereas this is more of a smooth dip. And the reality with these engines is that slow, like down low airflow and up high airflow, you can run into those sort of transition points where suddenly you get exhaust pulse reflections and stuff like that. And I don't want to go messing around with this in case those are what's the actual result of this, and this is more how Honda deals with this. So, this isn't, I don't feel with these that I'm really fighting an exhaust noise test or an emissions test. Of course, I believe this area here would probably never get into. Um, so, yeah, red bad, but uh, yeah, that covers that. Now, the log data was fun. Um, and I suppose this gets into this. This will probably be a separate video, so I'll actually sign off on this for now, and uh, we'll come back and I'll talk about the log files and and how decoding that can actually help tuners.